but a number of worrying issues there. I mean, you're listening to the fact that there's some power cuts in some of the provinces. You think about an area like Qwa Qwa, where my colleague Jukulane is also tracking developments there. There are power outages. These particular problems will then impact the work of the IEC officials in some of those provinces. At the same time, you're then listening to an IEC that's talking about the fact that it experienced a late surge and are processing a large number of voters in certain areas, particularly metropolitan areas such as Gauteng, Western Cape, Kwa Zulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. So if you then have power cuts in some of these particular areas, how are you then going to be dealing with this upsurge as well? But also the IEC saying that it's now making sure that everything goes by the book in some of these particular voting stations. At the same time, you think about that VMD, that system where your ID gets scanned. It seems to have been problematic in a number of areas as well, although the IEC is saying that this did not prejudice the voters in any way, because there still is that particular manual system where they're scratching off your name. But then it begs the question, why then still use this particular system? What are some of the problems? What is going on there in order to try and understand, should we still be using it or stick with the manual process? But one understands, of course, the move when it comes to technology. At the same time, you think about the counting process that is to then ensue after 9 p.m. when the stations are closing. But then you're listening to some of the reporters who are asking questions there. They talk about some of these stations that are said to have closed around 2 p.m. and then some of the electorate were told that it is now counting time. So how is it counting time then at 2 p.m.? So a number of questions that are being asked. That speak to someone who actually did attend that particular briefing, and that's my colleague Natasha Phiri, who's the SABC News political reporter, who is standing by on the floor for us. Natasha, of course, a lot of focus on some of the problems that the IEC is talking about, and hot on the heels is the issue of these power cuts, and a lot of people are wondering what exactly is going on.
Definitely, Bongi, where the issue of power cuts is quite a pertinent one, and we've heard from our reporters and our colleagues, Phumelele in Qwa Qwa, complaining that she went to go visit a voting station and there were power cuts there. Those who were at the voting station who attempted to vote, some very disgruntled and threatening to leave. Others had actually used their phones as torches to actually vote. But you also get other incidences, I mean, messages coming through that in some voting stations in the places like Ugu, there is no electricity, there are power cuts, and people are just left out in the dark. There's also another incident there in Jukulane, and of course the IEC CEO, Mr. Simon Mabula, said that they've got plus or minus 34,000 lights, and these lights will then be provided to these voting stations. But I mean, in places like Jukulane, Bongiwe, I mean, that is a place where we all know, I mean, a place is not safe. Patricia Versace has been actually giving reports from that area, and some people have been complaining about the issues of safety. What then happens then? I asked the question that there was some assurances given by the IEC that there would be no load shedding on the day, and Mr. Mamabolo had actually clarified, saying that these assurances were given to them by Eskom. So as to what is happening in those voting stations, the IEC still has to come back and actually still has to probably investigate what's happening, get a hold of the various presiding officers, and find a solution before that 9 o'clock deadline where voting stations will probably close.
And Natasha, of course, as we're speaking to our viewers this evening, we are showing them the visuals of what has been taking place in Qwa Qwa, which is where our colleague Phumelele is stationed. These are visuals coming to you live from Qwa Qwa. And you can imagine, what does it mean then if they are now having to use their cell phones? They're now having to, try and really make up for this particular process. There's supposed to be a supply of electricity that is uninterrupted. And of course, as you say, Natasha, the IEC is saying that they were given assurances by Eskom, but then assurances mean nothing, especially when it comes to this particular problem. But another issue, Natasha, is also this issue of the VMD. That particular device as well is again under scrutiny, And now a number of voting stations are reverting to the manual process, which begs the question, are we having problems with that particular device again?
Well, Bongi, you're quite right. And the issue of VMDs also came up. We saw a statement there by the EFF leader, Mr. Julius Malema, saying that he went to a particular voting station there in Limpopo. There was a crisis yet again with the VMD. They then reverted to using, the manual system. But then that is where voters actually get tired, Bongi. But unfortunately, they have to be patient and actually wait in the line. So the EFF had actually released a statement 2 hours before this briefing, actually complaining and raising this concern, and hopefully the political party itself will actually raise this complaint through the PLC, the Political Party Liaison Committee, with the IEC to ensure that these problems don't occur again. But of course the IEC also just requesting somewhat that voters be patient. So if the VMD doesn't work and there's network issues with the voter management device, then unfortunately voters will have to be patient and then resort to the manual device. But I think, Bongi, also another issue that came up a lot, the Section 24A votes, people have been, there's some sort of confusion around it. You've raised, there was a colleague who actually raised a question to say that for those who actually told right now, or this week or last week, after the deadline of the 17th of May, that they actually have to be deployed to another province, what happens to them? Unfortunately, they have, no right to vote. Actually, unfortunately, they cannot vote under the Section 24A vote because they did not apply on the 17th, of May.
Natasha Phiri there, thank you so much for that update. That's our SABC News political reporter.